All right. Thanks for everyone that's joined. It's 12:01. A lot to cover. Welcome to the SEPRO Landscape webinar. My name is Kyle Briscoe. I'm a senior research manager with SEPRO. I'll be joined by Dr. Eric Bagitsky, technical development manager, and Dr. J.C. Chong, technical development manager on the ornamental side. Today, we're going to cover all things landscape. We're going to cover weed control, especially faster weed control with Octane. We're going to cover reducing your trimming and your labor, given the current reality with the labor situation and managing landscape. We've got some solutions in terms of PGRs for both the shrubs and the turf that we think can help save on labor. And then also managing common landscape pests and plant problems covered by Dr. J.C. Chong. And of course, if you've got questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom. We'll stop in between sections and try to answer questions as they come in. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Eric Bagitsky to kick off this landscape webinar.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Again, Dr. Eric Bagitsky here. I'm going to be covering the section on Octane or post-emergence weed control, and then also discussing a little bit about our landscape PGRs. So just quickly here for my little section, just some questions that I'm hoping to try to answer throughout my section here. What is Octane? Where does it fit in landscape weed control programs? What benefits can Octane provide applicators? And then what are some recommended programs? And then for the landscape PGR portion, first off, how do plant growth regulators work? How can they be used to help maintain landscapes? What are some examples of landscape PGRs? How to choose the right PGR for you? And then what are some of the benefits of utilizing landscape PGRs? All right, so first let's talk about what Octane is. So again, this is our post-emergent broadleaf weed control product. Active ingredient pyroflufen ethyl. It's a group 14 PPO inhibitor. And by itself, it provides broadleaf weed control. Some of the key characteristics: it has a relatively low use rate compared to other post-emergent products on the market. It's labeled on all warm and cool season turf species, so you don't have to worry about specific cultivar differences or anything like that. It's relatively safe on everything. And then a little bit different than other products, it's very safe on newly seeded, sodded, or sprigged turf, so you don't have to worry about coming in and renovating an area. You can use Octane in those situations. And then most importantly, a key characteristic is it helps speed up some of the systemic herbicides that you would also be using in the turf grass scenario. So first, let's cover the turf safety. Again, I mentioned it's very safe on all warm and cool season turf species, both in established turf and in newly seeded or sodded turf. So we've seen tolerance even in centipede grass up to a 5x rate, and then in tall fescue creeping bentgrass even up to a 10x rate. And then also in newly seeded turf, we've seen no injury up to a 10x rate, even when made 2, 4, and 7 days after seedling emergence on some of our cool season species and warm season species. So overall, just extremely safe on all your turf species. So again, Octane, when applied by itself, has a lot of activity across a wide range of broadleaf weeds. These are just a list here taken straight from the label. And when Octane's applied alone, these species can be controlled or suppressed up to 4 inches in height, rosettes of 3 inches in diameter or less. So similar to other post-emergence herbicides, you want to try to target these weeds when they're small before they get well established to get the best control. But probably more importantly, when it comes to Octane, one of the key characteristics is when you mix it with other pre-emergence herbicides, it does speed up control. It also increases some of the efficacy that you'll see from other post-emergence herbicides. So it's very compatible with all post-emergence herbicides you're going to be spraying in a landscape type environment. You can reduce the rate down to just 1.5 ounces when in combination with other herbicides. So when applied alone, it's typically at a 3 or 4 ounce rate, but in combination, you can reduce that down to just 1.5 ounces. The annual use rate is 13.6 fluid ounces per acre per year, so you do get multiple uses out of it, especially at that 1.5 ounce rate. And I think the picture there on the right kind of highlights what this product can do when combined with other products. So in this case, we use Trimec, a typical three-way product. This is 20 days after application in Dandelion. You can see that middle pot there with Octane in the tank with Trimec. You're getting much more herbicide activity, much more burn down, and ultimately higher efficacy. So just some images in the field. Again, this is looking at Dandelion just 8 days after application of Octane and Trimec. That image on the left is just Trimec by itself versus the image on the right of Octane plus Trimec. Again, just to show the same thing I showed on the previous slide of increased purple in those leaves, increased epinacity, just overall more herbicide activity with Octane in the tank with Trimec and to lead to better weed control. So just some data highlighting the same thing. This is looking at percent dandelion control with the dark blue bars being Trimec by itself, light blue being Octane and Trimec tank mixed at 14, 28, and 56 days after application. You can see at each of these rating dates, you're seeing more dandelion control, again, when the product is tank mixed with Octane versus Trimec by itself. This is looking at, again, Dandelion, a different post-emergence herbicide tank mix with Octane. In this case, it's Speed Zone. And this is really just to highlight the speed at which Octane can control these weeds. So these images were taken just 4 days after application. You can see a non-treated plant there on the left, Speed Zone by itself in the middle. And then on the right is Octane mixed with Speed Zone. Again, even at just 4 days, you're seeing that burn down of the foliage while the systemic herbicide is working in that plant. So you're getting, not only is it increasing the efficacy, but you're getting a faster rate of control compared to these products by themselves. And then also Octane works for other herbicides, not just for broadleaf weed control, but also products like Drive or Quinclorac for grassy weed control. In this case, this is looking at large crabgrass. This was put out using a backpack sprayer, 30 gallons per acre. Again, this is just 4 days after treatment. The image on the left there is Drive at the full labeled rate by itself versus Drive plus Octane there on the image on the right. And again, you could definitely see increased burn down of that large crabgrass and the Bermuda grass there when you throw Octane in the tank. So not only does it work with broadleaf weeds, but also grassy weeds as well. And then additionally to broadleaf weeds and grassy weeds, you can increase even nut sedge control. In this case, we're tank mixing Octane with Sedgehammer or halosulfuron. This was applied via backpack sprayer, 20 gallons per acre, looking at 2 weeks after application. In that image on the left there, you can see the Sedgehammer by itself at the labeled rate. You're seeing some yellowing of that yellow nut sedge there. Coming 14 days after application. But if you compare that to the image on the right, which is tank mixed with Octane, you definitely see some increased chlorosis there, increased activity of that nut sedge. So this is just to highlight, not only does it work with broadleaves, but when tank mixed with other herbicides, it could be used as a, to increase drive activity on grassy weeds, and then other herbicides for nut sedge control as well.
Hey, Eric, just a question that came in. Is it good to mix with Solero for sedges and bent grass fairways?
Sure, yeah. So we have recommendations on tank mixing with Solero. It definitely works. Again, you could get some nut sedge control out of that as well. But yeah, I mean, again, with out safety concerns with Octane, it can be tank mixed with just about any post-emergence product that you could think of, and increase nut sedge activity in other weed species as well. So absolutely. All right, thank you for that question. Then lastly here, just to summarize our portion on Octane here, Octane really provides results you can see. As I've highlighted, it effectively speeds up weed control when tank mixed with other post-emergent systemic herbicides, leading to that increased visual herbicidal activity. And ultimately, think about it from the perspective of you're applying a home lawn or a commercial property. and you have clients looking at this, they can see the effects of the herbicide acting faster, increases their satisfaction levels, which ultimately leads to less callbacks, less retreatment on your part. And then just again to highlight key characteristics of octane: very safe on all warm and cool season turfgrass species, safe on newly sprigged or sprigged turfgrass, and then an overall low use rate compared to other products on the market. All right, do we have any other questions on octane before I switch gears here, Casey?
Eric, we do. We've got some good ones that have come in. Does it work in Floratam turfs?
Floratam turfs. Interesting. Kyle, do you have any answer to that one?
I mean, from a standpoint of safety, I don't think that there's going to be an issue there. Now, what it come down to is what weeds we're trying to control. Floratam, St. Augustine is what's coming to mind with the Floratam, and what weeds are we trying to control within the Floratam.
A few other ones. What surfactant was used with the drive and accelerate, and do you use surfactants with octane?
Yeah, so octane can be used with surfactants. With drive specifically, I think drive calls for an MSO added in on the label. And so I think in those images, I'm assuming we did have MSO in those. I don't remember off the top of my head, but typically you would see that. That's not going to influence the effect that octane has on it. If anything, it's going to improve the efficacy of the drive. So definitely recommend that. Ultimately, I'm going to say whatever post-emergent herbicide you're mixing octane with, go off those labeled recommendations. If they recommend an NIS or an MSO or crop oil or anything, that's not going to affect the octane at all. I would just go off the labeled recommendations for the other products.
What about if you add octane to a three-way herbicide, will you get clover? Will you be able to get clover as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, clover is listed on that list of products that actually octane has activity on by itself. But yeah, especially if you're going to mix it with a three-way, a trimec, something like that, absolutely, you're going to get increased control. I would think take mixing octane with trimec for sure.
All right, great, thanks.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit here for the remainder of my portion and talk about some plant growth regulators for our landscape ornamentals. All right, so briefly, let's talk about some of the benefits that you can get by implementing landscape PGRs into your landscape. I mean, the first thing most people think about when it comes to PGRs is saving time and money, trimming, and while it's definitely true, there's definitely other benefits to having PGRs in your program as well. First off, it will increase and improve your overall plant health and quality. You're going to get more consistent, compact plants. And in addition to that, you also get enhanced flowering in many cases with many different species. So improve the aesthetic quality of your landscape. And then it also increases and improves your tolerance to diseases and other potential pests as well. You also get some operational benefits. So, not only are you saving money, but you're also going to save frequency and time spent trimming in these cases, which ultimately will reduce your risk of potential accidents, reduce cleanup and disposals and things like that. And then ultimately, yes, you're going to get some economic benefits as well. You can reallocate, some of that labor that you would be spending on trimming to other areas of the landscape to help improve the overall quality. And again, you're going to save on disposal fees and things like that, and just time spent, traveling to these different sites. And overall, you could expect a typical savings of even 30 and up to even 70% versus just trimming by themselves by utilizing landscape PGR. So many potential benefits outside just the economic benefits. So let's go over some of the products that SEPRO has to offer in terms of landscape PGRs. First off, we're going to talk about two granular formulated plant growth regulators. So Cutlass 33G and then Cutlass Shrub and Tree Sculptor, or STS. Both these products utilize florprimidol as an AI, and then our Cutlass STS also has paclobutrazol in the formulation. Both these products are early GA inhibitors, and them being a granular formulated product, it is primarily root absorbed. And a benefit to having a granular formulation when it comes to landscape PGRs is you can apply them similarly to how you would a granular fertilizer. So same equipment, same methodology in many cases to put this product out as you would a fertilizer. One thing to note about granular formulated PGRs is they typically take longer to observe the regulation effects. So in the case of Cutlass 3,3G, you could expect maybe even 4 weeks for that regulation effect to kick in before you start observing the regulation. A little bit longer even for Cutlass STS. But on the other side of that, you do typically get longer term regulation compared to other formulations. So with Cutlass 3,3G, depending on the species and the growing conditions, you can expect regulation up to even 6 months, or Cutlass STS even up to a year in certain situations. So we also have another PGR that is a foliar or a liquid applied product, Cutlass Quick Stop. This also utilizes the AI fliprimidol. So again, another early GA inhibiting plant growth regulator. In this case, when you apply it foliarly, it is absorbed foliarly, so it's absorbed through the foliage, through the leaves, and actively growing tissues of the plant. And these will be applied similarly to the way you would apply a contact fungicide or insecticide to your landscape plants. A little bit different from granular formulations. You get a little bit quicker regulation. You could start observing some effects even just 1 week after application. But on the other side, you know, compared to granular formulated products, you typically get a little bit shorter term regulation. So you're still going to get, 3 to 4 months depending on species and everything, but maybe a little less than you would with a granular product in general. So which PGR is right for you in your landscape? So we've really narrowed it down to just these 4 questions to ask when you're trying to make this decision. First off, identify what species you have and estimate the height of your plants, and I'll highlight why that's important coming up. And then you want to choose the application method that best suits your operation. So this could go anywhere from, what kind of equipment do you have, how often do you visit the site, what size plants you have, how easy is it to adequately apply a spray versus a granular. So it's really going to depend on your situation, which one you want to go with. And from there, you want to select the best PGR for your specific site. And then lastly, treat the plants with the appropriate application rate. And I'll go into more details about that here in a second. So first off, if you end up choosing a granular formulated product, such as our Cutlass 3,3G and our Cutlass STS, typically you're going to want for 3,3G shrubs to be less than 7 feet. STS, it could go a little bit higher from 5 to 15 feet. But some of the things about granular formulated products, application rate typically in pounds of product per 1,000 square feet, but this rate is going to be dependent on plant species and height, and I'll cover that briefly later. But generally, this can be applied over the top of any woody shrub and herbaceous perennials. You're typically going to want to avoid applying this to landscape annuals due to over-regulation of those specific situations, but in general, any woody, herbaceous perennial or woody shrub is good. Your larger shrubs, you want to make sure that you're making a uniform application within the drip line. So keep in mind with granular products, it's typically root absorbed. So you're going to want to apply it where those roots are, which is typically out to within the drip line of those larger shrubs. You're going to want to water these in within a week after application. And then we also have calibration trays to help make a uniform application. Just contact your SEPRO rep if you're interested, and they'll have some available for you. But again, I want to highlight the benefits of a granular application is you could typically use whatever equipment that you have on hand. So a typical belly grinder or a spreader of that kind, anything that you put out fertilizer with, you can use to put out a granular formulation. Okay, so looking at your programs here. So how do you go about timing your application versus trimming plants? Typically with a granular formulated product, you're going to put out the product first and then wait several weeks after before you come in and trim the plants to the desired size and shape. So ultimately, the how long you wait after application before you trim will depend on the product you select and also on the size and species of the shrub that you're trying to regulate. So in general, with Cutlass 3.3G, you're typically going to want to wait about 3 to 4 weeks after application before you come in and trim those plants. With STS, maybe a little bit longer at 6 to 8 weeks. But the general rule of thumb is the taller the shrub is, the longer it's going to take for that regulation to kick in. So the rule of thumb is for every foot of height that you get increase, you can add another week onto how long you wait to trim those. So it's going to take longer for that product to get into the plant, get fully absorbed, and translocate up to the upper regions of the growing parts of the plants. So just some images of what to expect from some of these granular formulated products like Cutlass 3.3G. This just highlights some of the, this is 4 months after treatment. So pretty significant effects there. You can definitely see the regulation effect in terms of the internode lengths of those branches being reduced, and then an overall, increased, darker green color in that case with the treated side versus the untreated. Overall, a healthier and better looking plant. And then in addition, you do typically see a sense of flowering enhancement as well. This is looking at downy jasmine. Those plants on the right there treated with 3.3G versus the untreated on the left. You can definitely see an influence on flowering and overall regulation. Just overall better aesthetic quality on those plants on the right with 3.3G. All right, so switching over to a foliar application. So you've decided you want to make a Cutlass Quick Stop application. Again, how do you time the application versus trimming these? And it's going to be opposite to what you'd experience with the granular product. So typically you want to trim the plants to your desired size and shape first, then come in with your application within a week after that with the foliar application. So with these liquid products, the application rates are typically in fluid ounces per gallon, so you could mix it in a backpack sprayer. Again, the rates are going to be based on plant species, but in general, 1 gallon of solution will typically cover about 300 to 500 square feet. You're going to want to use a sprayer with consistent pressure. And something to highlight with the foliar application is you typically want to treat all exposed sides of the plant evenly. So you're going to spray these to drip. And then again, you're going to treat all the exposed sides of the plant. And this image is just to really highlight the importance of getting an even application across the entire plant. In this case, this is looking at Burford Holly. This is 56 days after treatment. But you can definitely see, that lower left side of the plant is the only thing that was treated with Cutlass Quick Stop foliar product. And it's only going to regulate the part of the plant that you treat. So again, I just want to stress, when you go to make an application, make sure you're treating all parts of the plant equally. Just another image. This is looking at ligustrum, so different species here, but this is 51 days after treatment. This is some of the results you could expect to see with a Cutlass Quick Stop application, even up to 51 days after treatment. Definitely seeing those regulation effects there compared to the non-treated plant. Again, and we, at SEPRO, we have recommendations for all the different types of species of different plants, what typical rates you're going to use with Cutlass Quick Stop, and then we have it divided in our granular PGRs into a low, medium, high rate. Depending on height. So we can, contact your local rep and we can get you pointed in the right direction and get you dialed in on what kind of rate and product you should use in your landscape. All right, Casey, any questions on that before I jump into banded applications?
Yeah, just a couple things. The first one I can answer is Quick Stop registered in California? Unfortunately, Cutlass Quick Stop is not registered in California. How and why should I choose between, a liquid versus a granular? That's a great question. We get that a lot.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it really depends on, a lot of times you think about, ease of access in those areas. So typically, if you want longer regulation, if you're not going to have access to those very often, you may want to go with a granular formulation. You're going to get longer residual of that material. Again, equipment is another thing. If you have access to a belly grinder, maybe you don't have access to a good sprayer or vice versa, that could influence your decision. And really just, it's really up to you. I think they're all great products, but really just depends on each individual situation. I'm going to recommend too that, contact your local rep, and talk things over with them with your specific situation. We can get you dialed in on what would be the best situation for you.
Thanks for that, Eric. Another one is in regards to just timing. When should I start my granular PGR program, and versus when should I start my foliar PGR program?
Sure. So I'm going to recommend it in both situations. You're going to want the plants to be actively growing. I think you have a little bit more leeway maybe with the granular because it is going to take longer for the product to get into the plant. Get off the carrier, get and absorbed into the plant, and get into and translocated. But again, wait till the plants are actively growing before you make any kind of application there.
And I think we're good for now, Eric.
All right, perfect. So lastly, just a couple more slides here. I know I'm running short on time, but quickly I want to discuss some edging and banding applications of plant growth regulators. So these are situations where you have a turfed area right up against an adjacent sidewalk or landscape bed or something like that. Anywhere you're going to be string trimming or using a bladed edger type situation, you can definitely use PGRs in those areas to reduce the amount of time that you're trimming or edging those situations. So the product SEPRO has specifically for these types of applications is Legacy. Legacy is for Primidol plus Trinexipec ethyl, which is a Class E and Class B PGR combined, which means you get both root and foliar absorption, and typically you're going to see more growth suppression than just Trinexipec ethyl alone. And again, these could be applied to any turf grass in a banded type situation or edging. So how do you make these applications? So again, similar to what I was just discussing with landscape PGRs, you're going to wait until the turf grass is actively growing. So that would be a warm season out of dormancy or when a cool season grass is actively growing. And this is going to be similar to what you see with a foliar type application to landscape shrubs. You're going to want to edge and string trim prior to legacy application to minimize the amount of trimming you'll have to do afterwards. And the way to apply this product is to choose a standard walking speed of 2 to 3 miles per hour. Hold the boom steady over the turf surface in about a 6-inch band. And you do not want to apply these by moving the spray wand back and forth over the area, as this will result in non-uniform regulation. So keep it steady, hold it, and then walk along the edge of wherever you're treating at a consistent speed. Quickly, in terms of the rates you should use for legacy in these situations, again, we calibrate these to a 6-inch band applied at 40 gallons per acre. This will typically result in a growth suppression of 3 to 6 weeks, but that's going to be dependent on species and growing conditions and all that stuff. But in general, based on species, these are the rates you're going to want to use: 1 to 2 fluid ounces of legacy per gallon, or 0.75 to 1. But again, we can get you dialed in on rates if you choose to go with this product. Lastly, again, these banded type applications will give you regulation for anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks of control. This is just an image highlighting what you can expect. This is even 5 weeks after treatment. You can see that Bermuda grass there starting to kind of come out of those regulation effects, but even still, you're reducing the amount of trimming you're doing significantly by using this type of application. Last thing I'm going to touch on is we do have a resource on our website, a landscape PGR savings calculator. This goes for herbaceous perennials, woody shrubs, and banded type applications. You can put in specific numbers and values to what you have in terms of labor and different things like that, and we can really get you dialed in on what types of products to use and ultimately how much you're going to save over time using the PGR program. I think that's it for my portion. Is there any questions on edging, banding applications before I turn it over?
We've gotten a few additional questions, and one of them actually goes back to our landscape PGRs. And I was just recently down in Florida and saw some of this, but we went through a hard cold freeze and it shocked the plants. they're now actively growing, but when is a good time to get the product back out? Especially when there was a pretty hard freeze as there was down in Florida or other places.
Sure, absolutely. So it is very important to time your applications around that frost, because you will see some overregulation or even some bronzing in certain cases if you do get a hard frost after application. So I'd just be really careful to know your region, know when those frosts are going to typically occur. I know you can't predict everything, but typically try to get just past that last frost. And once they're actively growing, you're getting temperatures and in the 50s and 60s, you'll be typically good to go in terms of your application at that point.
And kind of moving back into legacy, just a couple questions here. Can I use legacy on an entire lawn? And if so, what rates do you recommend for those applications?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're labeled, at least for golf turf. Kyle, are we labeled for home lawns? I can't remember.
Yeah. So the label is general turf grass, so that spans lawns and athletic fields as well. From a rate standpoint, I think where we want to be from the banning rates is about somewhere in the 50 to 75% of the banning rate. So say you're going to put out an ounce per gallon on a banning rate. If you're going to go over the entire lawn, we're probably looking at a half ounce to 3/4 of an ounce per gallon.
And then another one is, can I use legacy around like a lake bank?
So there's it's a great question because it always gets asked. And actually, you've got to have a level per the label. You've got to have a level vegetative buffer to prevent runoff of the legacy. And we do have an option in ClearCast that is labeled. It is an aquatic herbicide, but at very low rates, it does very well with not only broadleaf weed control, but regulation on those lake banks.
Thanks, Kyle. That's all we got for now.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm JC Chong with SEPRO. So I'm going to touch on some insects and diseases we typically see in the landscape. As you know, there are a lot of bugs and there are a lot of disease out there. So there's no way I can cover everything. I'm just going to mention a few, that is some of the invasive species that we're starting to cause a lot of problem for us. And if you have any questions at all about specific insects and disease questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to get you some solutions to you. So, like I say, just going to be a few more common ones that I've seen: Kramer the box scale, two-spot cotton leafhopper, ficus whitefly. Disease-wise, this is a perfect time for powdery mildew, so we watch out for those. Leaf spot as well as arrow blight and things like that. There are a lot of insects I'm not going to be mentioning, but feel free to reach out. So the first one I want to talk about is the crepe myrtle box scale. For those of us that actually growing crepe myrtles anywhere in the South, and even it actually go up all the way to the Central Plain. If you grow crepe myrtle, you need to watch out for these invasive species. This is a scale insects that only feed on crepe myrtle. So when they start infesting a crepe myrtle, they don't just come in one or two. They basically cover the entire tree. So a very damaging pest species. They are not difficult to identify, really. If you have a crepe myrtle and you're starting to see some white fuzzy rice grain on the trunk and the branches, you got it. They are the only species that would cause that kind of symptoms on it. Next. So one of the biggest problem with the crepe myrtle box scale is that they produce a lot of pseudomode. So the pictures on the right-hand side, that is at the ground of a college in Columbia, South Carolina. The mulch under the crepe myrtle supposed to be just regular brown mulch, but they're completely black because of that black pseudomode. So it's not going to make it very good looking at all. That's one big reason why anybody really need to think about treating for the crepe myrtle box scale. And again, like I say, they're not difficult to identify. And another way for you to really know that you have the crepe myrtle box scale is that if you see those fuzzy rice grain just rub your finger over it. If your finger become red, bingo, you got gray murder box scale. Pretty easy to identify. Next. Kramer box scale, like I say, is an invasive species. It's originally from Asia. And now, first, it is found in Texas about 20 years ago. But now it's spreading just about everywhere. So all those green dots on the map here are basically the counties that are already reported Kramer box scale. But I can tell you for sure that the distribution is much wider than what this map is showing, because this map is sort of behind the time. But like I say, anywhere you grow crepe myrtle, you need to be watching out for this particular scale insect species. Next. And as far as management wise, I always think about them as whether you are doing a proactive preventive approach or a curative approach. So for the preventive approach, you basically want to start doing that before you don't even really notice any kind of infestation at all. And the best approach to that really is to do a systemic insecticide drench or granular application. The way that systemic insecticide is happening is that it will absorb by the trunk or absorb by the root, and then the active ingredient is going to stay inside the plant tissue itself. So it kind of gives you some protection for the future infestation. But if you already have plants that are infested, you're starting to see sooty mold, then you need to take more of a curative approach. Next, please. So I have my own curative approach, really. I call it a sort of two-pronged approach in some way, because you kind of have to tackle them in two angles. So you want to do both the drench and also the spray if you already have the infestation. And we have done quite a bit of work in South Carolina as far as North Carolina. When we find out is that if you just do one of them, it will give you some reduction, but it's not going to give you the best result. So if you already have infestation, you want to do a drench in the spring. When the leaves starting to flush, that's when you want to start the drench application or the granular application. And the best product we have tested and works out very well are Safari and Merit. So that you can do in the spring. And then later on, you want to do the spray. Now, the timing for spray really depends on when the little guys, the babies, are hatching. So the best way to figure out is get yourself an electrical tape, just wrap around the trunk of it with the sticky side on the outside. When the little babies are hatching, they're going to get stuck on that sticky tape. Then you know precisely when they're actually coming out. Once you see those little crawlers or babies, those are sort of reddish and brownish looking, then you can start spraying. Typically, they come out in late April to early May, and another generation in August, September. I would say probably put out that sticky tape probably in early April, just to be ahead of it. Once you trap them, you can start spraying. And you spray it once, then you spray another time 2 weeks later. And then for the second generation, do the same thing, spray once and then follow it up 2 weeks later. Next. And some of the best product that we have tested, one of the best product is Talus. It's an insect growth regulators. Talus is, we really recommend Talus using that because first, it is very, very effective for crawlers. It also will reduce the number of eggs that are produced by the female. And secondly, it is very, very compatible or very safe to some of the biological control agent that's already out there. Wherever we find the crepe myrtle box scale, we'll see a lot of scale, but we also see a lot of those lady beetle larvae crawling around eating those scales. So you don't want to end up killing those lady beetles larvae. That way, you basically have some of the friends that's helping you with controlling them. So we recommend Talus for the treatment because it's safe for the lady beetles larvae and also very effective against the scale. Another one would be Altus as well as Distance. Distance is another IGR. There are some of the product that we use that we have tried, for example, bifenthrin or cyanotraniliprole, dinotefuran, or imidacloprid. They work, but I typically recommend avoiding them simply because they will wipe out those lady beetle larvae. So You could use them, but knowing that it probably going to wipe out the biological control and cause the problem becoming even worse. Next. So a little bit more about Talus. This is one of our product. Like I said, it is an insect growth regulators. So it's very, very effective against scale insects and mealybugs as well as whiteflies. It's not only does it kill the nymphs like typical IGR does, but it also reduce the adult reproduction. So basically, you're killing the nymphs and reduce the reproduction. You're breaking the life cycle in a lot of ways. You can use it in just about all the ornamental plants, indoor and outside. And also it's pretty safe on beneficial insects. If you worry about honeybee, this is one product that's not gonna cause any kind of issue to honeybees at all. Next. So I work with scale insects for almost 20 years, and we've done a lot of trials on scale insects. And this is sort of my condensed version of how you can find the best solution for your scale insects. So there are basically three questions you want to ask yourself. Okay, there are a lot of scale insect species out there, but some of them will feed on the leaf, and some of them will feed on the trunk and the branches. So the first question is, where do they feed? Do they feed on the leaves, or do they feed on the woody tissues, the branches or the trunk? And the second question is, do they produce any honeydew or do they have any pseudomode? If they produce any honeydew or pseudomode at all, then the solution is going to be a little bit different. So for scale insects that feed on the leaf, the systemic insecticide drench or granular application is pretty effective. So that would be my first go-to. And you can always make that application in the spring. But if you have a scale insect species that feed on the trunks or on the branches, if they produce honeydew, then you can use a systemic insecticide. If they do not produce honeydew, then I would say you want to use a combination of horticultural oil and distance or talus, and you want to make the application at quality emergence. So there are a lot of products out there for scale insect control, but in this case, I sort of kind of condense it into an easy formula for you to follow. Next. We have another new invasive species called a two-spot cotton leafhopper. This is a very new species, probably been here for about a little bit over a year in the US, but it's already causing a lot of issue in the nursery trade. The biggest problem they have is that they infest hibiscus. So anywhere where you can grow hibiscus, whenever the cotton leafhopper ended up getting there, they're going to cause a lot of that issues. And one of the symptoms that the leafhoppers cause is called hopper burn. That's a symptoms where the leaves starting to turn yellow and starting to curl up. And when you flip over it, you're going to see a lot of that leafhoppers underneath it. Right now, it is pretty widespread in Florida, in both nurseries and landscape. But watch out for this particular leafhopper species, because wherever you can grow hibiscus, they probably will end up showing up. Next, please. So again, this is a species that come from Asia, but now it is pretty widespread from the Carolinas to Tennessee to Texas. But like I say, it's probably going to continue to spread. In fact, I think that in the summer, when we're starting to have a lot of storm blowing from the south to the north, the leafhopper is probably going to get picked up and dumped to the north. So expect them to show up in your neighborhood for sure. Next. This is what they look like. The adult is actually pretty easy to identify. They're about the length of the eraser on your pencil, so not a very big insect. But when you actually look at them, they're usually sort of greenish. On their wings, they have two black spots, and that's why they're common name, two-spot cotton leafhopper. And one of the biggest hosts they have is cotton. Like I say, they also feed on hibiscus. And you see that hopper burn symptoms, and you flip it over, you're going to see a lot of nymphs, and the pictures on the right-hand side show you all the different nymphs from big one to little ones, and also adults feeding underneath it. Next. To help you with a lot of management issues, we actually developed a easy management guide. for two-spot cotton leafhopper, you can scan that QR code and get a copy as well. Or you can go to our website or talk to one of our rep. We'll fix you up for that. So on that particular management guide, next. We will have a very specific insecticide rotation program for you to control the two-spot cotton leafhopper for both nursery and also for the landscape situations as well. As you can see, one of the best product for controlling two-spot leafhoppers is the Hachi Hachi. It's one of our best product. Talus is also extremely effective for the two-spot cotton leafhoppers. So SEPRO has two products that can help you with that. And you can always develop a rotation program. And in this case, I developed a program using Hachi Hachi, Talus, Altus, Tallstar, as well as Activate for managing both nursery and landscape management. Next. So a little bit about Hachi Hachi. Hachi Hachi is one of our insecticide. It is a broad spectrum insecticide. You can use it to control a lot of insect species, thrips, scale insects, mealybugs, caterpillars is very effective against caterpillars, as well as aphids and leafhoppers and beetles as well. It has a suppressive effect for powdery mildew and downy mildew as well. And one of the very important features of Hachi Hachi is that it actually stops feeding very, very quickly within 1 or 2 days. So you can make the application and know that the thrip will stop damaging the flowers, or the leafhoppers will stop transmitting some of the issues and stop feeding on the plant. So you have a pretty good reduction in damage very quickly. Next. Another thing I want to mention is whiteflies on ficus. And this is a major pest issue really in Florida. Again, in Florida, if you have been there, you're going to see that they have ficus hedges all over the place. And this particular whitefly species, or this group of whiteflies, can actually cause a lot of defoliation of the ficus hedge. The joke is that these whiteflies suddenly become a problem when Florida can see their neighbors through the hedges, and they don't like that. So for whiteflies, very important issues. Next. So there, like I say, there are about 6 different species, and this is just a picture of what they look like. The most important species, though, is called the ficus whitefly. That is the one that causes the most important damage. Next. So the whiteflies, they will produce a lot of pseudomode. And another symptoms of the infestation is that on the underside of the leaves, usually there's a lot of white wax on it, kind of fuzzy. So not hard to identify. But again, most important damage is that the hedge become defoliated and decline. Next. So as far as management is concerned, you can do it both preventively and curatively. If you're going to do it, I would recommend that, mostly for preventive, you want to think about drench or granular broadcast of one of the systemic insecticide. Spring is the time to make the applications. So some of the effective product are Arena, Xylem, Merit, Flagship, or Meridian. So these are some of the systemic insecticide you can apply as a drench or a granular and give you that protection to the hedges. Next. If you already have the issues, you basically have to spray to control them. Very similar to crepe myrtle box scale. So you want to start scouting in April. When you see the whiteflies, that's when you want to spray. Some of the most effective products include things like TriStar, Merit, Xylem, Tallstar, also effective. Our PGR, Talus, works very well. Distance, which is another PGR, as well as Forbid, Spiromazepine. These are some of the more effective insecticide for the ficus whitefly. Next. So let's move on to diseases. This is powdery mildew. It's probably one of the most common disease out there. I'm just showing you powdery mildews on the crepe myrtle. And these are sort of the white powdery stuff on the flowers as well as leaves. You're going to see them pretty frequently. Next. Aerial blight. There are a lot of different blight species out there. Needle blight is one of them, very, very common. What you're going to see is that this discoloration on the needles eventually they are just going to fall, and it's caused by several species of fungus. Boxwood blight, pretty common, caused by Calodonectra. And Phytophthora aerial blight is pretty common in the landscape as well. Now, you would typically think of Phytophthora as a root rot, but once they get into the canopy, they can become a pretty important issue as well. Next. There are a lot of leaf spot. Oh God, there are a lot of leaf spot. They all come in all different shapes, sizes, and all different colors, but they're not always caused by the same thing. There are more than 2,000 different genera of the pathogen that can cause leaf spot. On hydrangea, one of the most common one is a Cercospora leaf spot. On some of the tree species, anthracnose is very, very common. But like I said, those are fungus and they can cause issues, leaf spot. Some of the leaf spot that's most difficult to control are actually caused by bacteria. For example, this bacterial leaf spot on the hibiscus. I'm not going to go into too much of the details, but they all look a little bit different. Next, please. So even though they look a little bit of a difference, I want to remind you again that they may be caused by different pathogens. So you want to make sure you send your sample in to have those disease properly identified so that you know particularly what pathogen you're dealing with. Because a lot of time the management too is going to be different depending on your pathogen. For example, things that can work on fungi doesn't necessarily work on bacteria. So you want to know which one you're dealing with. And then the second thing is you really want to know what kind of environmental condition is going to trigger your disease outbreak. That's because most of the fungicide are actually preventive in nature. You want to apply them before the disease actually showed up. Once the disease showed up, it becomes very difficult to actually calm them down. So apply them before disease outbreak. Powdery mildew, for example, they love it cool and they love it humid. So we typically see them in the spring. Aerial blight is seen the same way, but they like it a little bit wetter. So you often see them with the coming of rain in the spring. Bacterial leaf spot are typically in the summer because they love it hot, they love it wet. So they usually become much more of a problem after rain. So you all kind of need to know what conditions is favorable for these diseases. And whenever you see those conditions coming, you want to make sure you make the applications to prevent the disease from outbreak. Next. So it's pretty important for you to have sort of a foundation. And copper fungicide is, I think, is a good way for you to build a foundation for your disease management program because they are broad spectrum. They can use to control fungi. They can also use to control bacteria, and there's a lot of pathogens they are controlling. So choosing copper fungicide as the foundation, as something that you use frequently, is a good way to prevent a lot of disease problem. Now, and they also deal with a lot of different mode of action within the pathogens. So the risk of resistance is low. Not to say no resistant risk, but it's much lower than a lot of other single site fungicide. And you can use them for preventive, and you can use them for curative treatment as well. Again, like I say, a lot of fungicide are actually preventive, but copper is curative. So we have 3 different products that's available. We have Camera O, QPro 5000, as well as Junction. Each one of them is going to be different. Camera O is a copper soap. What it does is that it leaves you very little residual. So for some of the more visible area, if you want to do a preventive treatment of diseases, this is a good option for it. QPro, it gives you really high amount of copper per spray. So this would actually really be my go-to if I want to deal with a lot of preventive treatment for diseases. Junction has 2 mode of action, is copper and mancozeb. So this is a very good product for both curative and preventive disease of control of a lot of diseases. Next. Right. That's all I got for insects and diseases.
JC, just 2 questions for you. Going back to the bark scale, does the bark scale attack other plants?
So the bark scale, the major target for the bark scales are crepe myrtles, but there are a few other species that they can also attack. St. John wort, they also can feed on ficus, well, figs to be more specific, and also spirea. So there are a few species that would deal with, but when it comes to really management, crepe myrtle is what you need to focus on.
And then the last one is if can Hachi Hachi be used on the crepe myrtle bark scale along with talus? Could you use them in combination?
So that's a good questions. I think just yes, you could definitely tank mix them and make sure that they can work very well. Hachi Hachi will help you really kill off a lot of nymphs, and the talus and do the same thing, but it also reduce the adult reproduction. So, you know, again, help you cut off the life cycle, break the life cycle in a lot of way.
Sure. Well, I know we have a few more. We're running a little short on time, and we will get all of those questions answered and follow up with an email with all those that are on the call today, and also those that haven't joined. But thanks for taking the time today. I know we covered a lot of topics from landscape PGRs to octane and our herbicide there, and then also JC with his topics he just covered. As well. So a lot covered, and hopefully it was valuable to you. Just want to, if you do have additional questions or want to, talk to somebody specifically in your area, feel free to reach out to anybody on this map here. This is our a list of those technical specialists that work for SEPRO. Feel free to reach out to any of them. They'll be happy to walk you through the products we talked today and anything additional that we have in our portfolio as well. Just did want to mention something specific, an end user offer we got going on right now, specifically around Cutlass 33G Quick Stop and Octane. So if you are interested in these products, we do have a special offer going on through the 30th. And you have the opportunity to get up to $650 off, depending on the products that you're buying and volume. So if you do have interest, reach out to your rep that we just had on the previous slide, or you could go to sepro.com/speed control for more details on this as well. So make sure you take advantage of it if it's something that interests you. Once again, thanks for taking the time to join us here today. If you have any questions, reach out. We've got if you have questions around the rates, we have the Octane and Cutlass Quick Stop rate sheet at the address there below, as well as Eric did mention the savings calculator. We have that available as well. So that's a great tool to be able to kind of hone in on. Put your specific numbers in and see the value of those products. And then obviously that special offer we have on Octane, Cutlass Quick Stop, and Cutlass